But in a situation where you find that a look at this,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.
Welcome back. It's still Daybreak on Trust TV, and we're now on the newspaper review segment where we'll be serving you headlines on the front pages of major national dailies here in Nigeria. As usual, we'll start with the Daily Trust newspaper, and from the very top, we see Trump lands in New York, meets lawyers ahead arraignment today. Also, Nigerian media owners launch complaints commission, say initiative won't gag press. We also see JAMB apologizes to Oyedepo's varsity flayed for barring hijab-wearing candidates. And for the glaring headline, we see despite dollar restriction, Nigeria imports 300 billion naira palm oil in 6 years. A couple of riders there get supply from Malaysia, India, China, Cameroon. A barrel sells for over $600. Work, vision needed to revamp sector, that's according to an expert. Cost of Nigeria's palm crude oil imports in 6 years. So we see a graphic representation of the cost breakdown over the years from 2017 up until 2022. And below the graphics, we see Nigeria struggling to find buyers for crude. And below the belt, 558 MDAs failed to account for 969 billion naira budget reallocations. Many injured as PDP APC supporters clash in Rivers. And finally, Obi's leaked audio. My name was wrongly mentioned. And that's the offer of offer. You can get these and more by getting the Daily Trust newspaper of today.
Let's take a look at the Guardian newspaper for today. It has a lead story that says, Afenifere Ohaneze Arewa youths reject interim government plot. The first rider, this is coming from Adebanjo, Ajayi remains suspended, has no right to issue statement for Afenifere. Then the second rider, Indigbo not part of any conspiracy, plans to attend Tinubu's swearing in. Then we also have another rider here. Decide presidential petitions before May 29, Agbakuba tells Tribunal. Then the fourth rider, native stage peaceful protests, vows to resist moves to truncate democratic rule. And beneath that, we see a picture of some of the protesters. We also have on The Guardian, worries over revenue, petrol scarcity as buyers shun Nigerian oil cargoes. We also have why media needs ombudsman by NUJ president. And just above the masthead, we have The Guardian restructures, appoints new editor, chief financial stroke operating officer. These are the major stories on The Guardian newspaper for today.
Ahead handover, military vows crackdown on security threats, warns IPOB, others. That's the lead story on the Punch newspaper. A couple of riders. Nobody should threaten integrity of Nigeria, truncate democracy. That's according to the Defense Headquarters and Army Chief. APC asks Biden to disregard anti-Tinubu petitions as protesters demonstrate in the U.S. Politicians rooting for interim government irresponsible, mischievous. Buhari Media Organization. And above the masthead, we see IATA warns Nigeria as airlines trapped funds hit $802 million. FG approves 173 loan apps, bars illegal online banks. Also, shareholders protest Oando planned delisting share acquisition. And below the pictorial, we see 1 killed, scores injured as Rivers APC PDP supporters clash. Also, Ramadan, divorce among young couples alarming, says Sheikh. Find that story on page 14. Also, absence of Lagos bishop accused of raping pastor stalls trial. And finally, on the Punch newspaper, Ohaneze, Tinubu, Sanwo-Olu, others mourn Orji, Kalu's wife.
Now let's move over to the Nation newspaper. It has a lead story that says governors elect at war over funds projects. And then we have a rider that says Alia takes on Autumn in Benue, Oti tackles Ikpeazu in Abia, And in Kano, it's Abba versus Ganduje. And beneath the pictorial there, we have presidential poll credible, APC US rights Biden. We also have APC organs should function, NWC members tell Adamu. And then the writer says a party should avoid 2015 scenario on National Assembly positions. And just above the masthead, we have NFIU may give governors more time to comply with cash limit. While we are wary of government regulation by media owners, and beneath that we have Ombudsman inaugurated. Still on the nation, oil price rises to $84 per barrel. Unions bank tenure extensions for Naseni CEO Haruna. And we also have Singer Portable gets bail. These are the major stories on the Nation newspaper for today.
And below the ident of the Blueprint newspaper, we see an interesting headline. Adamu Omishore running APC as a family business. You want to know why? Get a copy of the Blueprint newspaper. For the leading headline, less than 3 months away, cautious optimism, fears trail planned fuel subsidy removal. Nigeria's annual revenue will increase by 6 trillion naira. That's according to the CPPE. Sustaining present subsidy, a huge drain on the economy, according to George Okoli. Removing subsidy, unpatriotic, fixing refineries, way out, according to experts and labor. Nigerians should prepare for initial shocks on the economy at Defolari and Kio. Besides that, we see unions back 2-year tenure extension for Naseni EVC by Buhari. And underneath that, Tinubu Lawan Sanwo-Olu mourn Kalu's wife. And on page 22, we see AMCON to appeal judgment on Arik Air receivership. And on the belt, Senate audit report exposes 558 federal agencies over 969 billion naira assets. Catch that story on page 20. Below the belt, insecurity. Kaduna imposes curfew on Sabon Gari, Nasarawa, Tirkaniya. Transcorp Hotel PLC increases profit by 172%, grows revenue by 31.4 billion naira. And finally, on the Blueprint, protesters in America, UK, others don't promote insurrection in Nigeria.
Now let's take a look at the Leadership newspaper. It has a lead story that says 10th NAS leadership. Opposition parties brace for tough fight with APC. And the first rider will go with party that shares our ideology, NNPP. The next one, we're still monitoring development. This is coming from the Labour Party. The PDP alliance plot suffers setback as Wike Ibori backs Wase. And then we have North Central, Southwest senators will be the decider. And just above that, we have APC crisis, account for party funds, National Vice Chairman tells Adamu. Beneath that, suspense as police seal Labour Party Secretariat in Imo. We also have Imo affirms forfeiture of late Kashamo's lands to federal government. Labour Navy redeploys 52 rear admirals, 76 commandos in major shakeup. And just beneath the masthead, we have experts foresee Nigeria breaking epileptic power jinx. Above that, launch of Ombudsman not to gag press. This is from the publishers. We also have Rivers PDP protest at INEC office. APC candidate escapes death. These are the major stories on the Leadership newspaper for today.
We start from the very top of this day newspaper. Human Rights Commission cautions NBC over sanctioning of media houses. Nigerian media owners unveil National Complaints Commission. Also, NDCMB performs groundbreaking for construction of $7.04 billion pipe manufacturing plant in Bayelsa. And below the masthead, Donald Trump arrives New York ahead of today's historic arraignment. Catch that story on page 10. Also, gunshots, violence disrupts APC PDP's visit to INEC's office in Rivers. Thugs attack opposition party secretariat. Also, Tony Cole cries out, says his life in danger. And for the lead story, Yahya, Army will contain all threats to nation sovereignty. Says operations against saboteurs raised oil production to 1.3 million barrels per day. Also, major shake-up as Navy deploys senior officials. And for the pictorial there, we see the inauguration of the National Media Complaints Commission, and we could see a couple of broadcasters as well as media proprietors and other stakeholders in the picture. And that's it for this day newspaper.
Now let's look at our final newspaper for this morning, the Daily Times. It has a lead story that says 88 killed during 2023 polls. And beneath that, we have 558 MDAs failed to classify assets worth 969 billion naira. And above the masthead, we have 10th Senate presidency. Please, a Muslim candidate injurious to Nigeria's unity. This is coming from an APC chieftain. And beneath the pictorial there, we have confusion in APC over DSP Omagege's expulsion. We also have FG to partially commercialize 3 national parks. These are the major stories on Daily Times for today.
And moving forward, we're now joined by our reviewer this morning, Dr. Theophilus Abba. He is the director at the Daily Trust Foundation. Good morning. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
Yes. So let's start with the lead story on the Daily Trust newspaper. Despite dollar restriction, Nigeria imports 300 billion naira palm oil in 6 years. Do we still need to be importing palm oil, looking at how rich Nigeria is in terms of agriculture and human capital? One would expect that this would be a thing of the past.
Well, when you talk about importation of palm oil, we know that several states in Nigeria, if you go to the southeast, south, part of north central, they are the belt of palm oil production in Nigeria. But what has happened is that we have not developed that industry, that sector, to the point that they will produce the quality or the competitive quantity of palm oil. If you look at the trend in palm oil business in Nigeria, we are at the local production level, you discover that the 20 liters of palm oil, which sells for, let's say, 20,000 in rural areas, is sold for about 30,000, 35,000 in the cities. Talking about 20 liters, 25 liters. And then there is no year that you don't have shortfall. There is no year that there is a glut in palm oil production, even for those who use local palm oil. And so, as far as Nigeria is concerned, we have a shortfall in palm oil production. And it's because we have not industrialized, we have not developed that sector. If you look at Malaysia, look at India, they have factories that produce palm oil.
Yes,
and if you look at the packaging,
yes. You were talking about the shortfall. That is very true because we produce about 1.4 metric tons yearly, but our consumption 1.4 million metric tons, and our consumption is about 3 million metric tons. Okay. So of course we produce lower than what. But then you mentioned Malaysia. That's actually our major source of importation. Yes. Now Malaysia took the palm seeds from Nigeria in the 60s.
Yes.
Now they are the second biggest exporter of palm oil across the world, and they are our own Nigeria's major source of importation. I mean,
it's an irony, and that is to tell you that, you see, the kind of leadership that we have in this country has failed to develop the potential in Nigeria. Now we have the potential of producing, enough palm oil to export. That's what I was even driving at. But you still leave palm oil production to the local woman, to the village woman, it's actually women who have occupied that industry, where you can actually set up industries, where you can actually do proper packaging, where you can reduce the labor, the physical labor that goes into it and produce more, where you can generate more palm oil from the palm fruit, that you have. From what I see, I've never been to Malaysia, but if you look at palm plantation, you see, discover that it's a huge business. It's not like something you leave, for a few persons. But it's something that people do deliberately. They plant palm trees deliberately in such a manner that they know what to harvest. But in Nigeria, we still leave it. Oh, my great grandfather had about 20 palm trees, and so I've inherited it. Some of the palm trees that we're talking about, they are no longer really productive. They are, I mean, they have overused, they have overproduced. And we are not deliberately cultivating this, and it's because of leadership. If you have proper leadership, you know, a place like, let me talk about Kogi State. A place like Kogi State should become, you know, a factory, a palm oil production sector, where you can see the economy depends largely on palm oil, because it produces so well, and it's so, and with little, what do I call it? With little labor, you know, you can get a whole lot of palm fruit, you know, from in Kogi State alone. I'm not talking of go to Anambra, yes, go to Imo, go to Akwa Ibom, go to Cross River, all those states, go to Ekiti, all of them, they are palm oil producers, but government has not made effort to develop that sector to in such a manner that it can be competitive. Yes. And that is where the problem lies.
Yes, so it cuts across a large part of Nigeria, because I know from the southwest to the southeast, we would all see, you know, rural areas where you see people invest heavily in the production of palm oil. Unfortunately, they cannot scale up because the funds are not just there. So it's a good thing we're talking about palm oil and agriculture in general, because I was going to ask, you know, following the ban on a couple of items, including rice, one would have expected that by now would have been sufficient, at least, even if we wouldn't be producing in quantities that we can export. But then we see that the cost of rice in the market is now around roughly 35,000, depending on whether you're buying, you know, the local. It's even going to be difficult for you to get the foreign rice. Yeah. So do we still blame, you know, it on leadership and the kind of leaders that we have, and absolve citizens who are not really doing much in terms of, you know, getting into the sector? Because you would say the young people themselves are not even enthusiastic about, you know, getting into agriculture as it is.
I think the major issue, when you talk about leadership, it matters a lot. In Malaysia, it was a deliberate effort by the government that, look, we have the capacity to produce this, and then let's put in a lot of effort. Now, young people are into farming, because the majority of the fruit that we produce, I mean, it's produced by young people. There are those who go to farm. Maybe you talk about ownership, maybe not ownership, but the labor, because we still use hard labor, you know, exactly, physical strength to do farming. Yes, and it's young men who have the strength. It's young men. Go to rural areas. If you have a farm in a rural area, I mean, you may not. It's the young people who do the labor on the farm for you.
They are not for the labor.
No,
right?
what I'm driving at is this. You see, leadership matters. You understand? Yes, when there's a deliberate, okay, if you talk of rice, the improvement in rice production, yes, it was because Buhari came and said, look, we have to do something about it, and we had the Anchor Borrowers Loan. Scheme, and the Anchor Borrowers Scheme gave money to those people who are in the rice production belt to produce this huge quantity of rice, even though there is no continuity, I mean, the real sense of it.
Exactly.
You understand?
No,
but you see, if it were not for that support, it wouldn't have been possible to produce the quantity of rice that, I mean, that saw an improvement in the local production of rice.
Okay, I was just thinking, when this government came in 2015, they kept on talking about diversification of the economy. And at that time, it was very important that we diversified the economy. And so we saw some revolution in the rice sector. Why was it just the rice? I mean, just thinking about it, the oil is another area that they would have gone into, and then other areas as well.
Well, I think I think it was not right that it was only rice, because we have other sectors. Like there's a sector like cashew, you know. Cocoa. The cashew sector is so huge, you know, but we still depend on the local. There is no support, you know, and that is where the diversification issue ought to have come up, you know. But we criticized Emefiele, you know, for entering into some of these areas. But the Ministry of Agriculture, the question will ask is that, what is that ministry doing? You know, if the Minister of Agriculture is not coming up with initiative, if the Minister of Agriculture is not doing, I mean, enough to help those who are into agriculture, then there's little that we can achieve. So the next government, let's think about what will happen next. The next government should think about building, helping the various sectors to grow, because for any sector to grow, it needs encouragement. And as far as Nigeria is concerned, the bulk of the money, the bulk of the resources we have in this country is still within within government. And so I'm thinking that instead of wasting funds, government should think about how to identify important sectors, especially in the agricultural sector, because that is the low-hanging one. We cannot compete in terms of technology. We can't compete in the technology sector. But in agriculture, we can compete because we have this favor of fertile soil. There's nothing you cannot grow in Nigeria. You can grow cash crops in Nigeria. You can grow. There's nothing you cannot grow. So if we can say, okay, let's see how we can diversify the economy by boosting the agricultural sector. Segment the sectors and say, okay, in the southwest, which one do they have comparative advantage? In the north central, what product they, and then make a deliberate effort. These things don't happen by chance. Deliberate effort to grow them.
All right.
It will help.
All right, now let's take a look at this other story on the front page of the Daily Trust. It's also on the front page of most of the newspapers today. Nigeria Media Owners Lodge Complaints Commission says initiative on gang press. Now, this is the media having an initiative to self-regulate. What do you make of it?
Well, I think it's a positive development. And I'm happy that the caliber of persons we have there, and the ombudsman, there are people who understand the media. They have worked in the media houses. They know what happens in the media. They know the challenges facing the media. Now, over the years, we used to have the Nigerian Press Organization, NPO, and the idea of NPO was to do something close to this, but NPO became something like government controlled, whereby if a government official complains, about a publication in the media, then it means that NPO will be giving a marching order to clamp down, things like that. And we have discovered that even though some persons complain about the media, but you see, there are laws, there are laws that can take control, that can resolve some of these complaints. There are so many laws in Nigeria. Libel laws are there, so which you can use. But instead of people applying these laws, rather they rather do what I call self-help, by attacking journalists, by doing all sorts of things. So an ombudsman of this nature will help us a lot. And I believe that they will interact with government, because there are a lot of things that government agencies, regulatory sectors are doing which are not appropriate. Personally, from my own experience, we've had, Daily Trust has had an ombudsman or ombudswoman. We had an ombudswoman, we had an ombudsman. And I know that all the years that I was with the Daily Trust on Sunday, there were only very few complaints, very, very few complaints against Daily Trust publication. Even in Nigeria today, the complaints against the traditional media will be limited because of the control system that we put in place. You understand? So I pity them, I sympathize with them, because they will hardly have enough work to do as ombudsmen. Because if you look at our newspapers, we are not reckless in the real sense of it. Recklessness that you find is maybe on the social media.
But when you say you sympathize with them, sorry to cut you short, isn't it good news sort of when they don't have much work in terms of people coming to them to report cases?
Well, it's good news, but if you are given a job and you are almost idle, that's why I say I sympathize with them.
Okay.
Because if you read Nigerian newspapers, let's face the fact, you read Nigerian newspapers, the kind of critical reporting that you expect, you don't find.
So you're giving us a pass mark?
Yeah, I don't think it's totally a pass mark. Let me tell you, the papers that we publish in Nigeria is about 86% PR. So this complaint that we hear, maybe one complaint, two complaints in a month, And maybe some of them don't even have substance. By the time they go to the ombudsman, they just go that look, maybe it's neither here nor there. This story was written, it's not properly. I remember somebody came and said my name was not properly spelled. The name that was written was not mine. I said, okay, what's the problem? Let's correct it. You understand? So I'm thinking that the government, the pressure will come from government. Because government doesn't like critical reporting.
Yeah,
that's the unfortunate thing.
Doctor, I was going to say that, there's been efforts by the government to introduce bills to regulate the media. Now the media has set up a complaints commission to regulate itself, which means that any complaint you have, you take it to them. And these people are experts. They are people who have worked in this field. They understand, like you noted, the challenges and how the media really operates. So these people can actually give advice. So do you think that this will put pay to the efforts to introduce bills to, regulate the media, because there's already
it should. It should, but the objective of government may not be achieved. What government wants to do is to gag. You understand? The government wants to gag the press. They want to gag the media.
They've always said that that's not their intention.
Of course, we know. We know that is their intention. Some of the content or some of the bills, that they have sponsored, they demonstrate that their desire is to gag the press. For instance, what has happened to Channels Television, even Daily Trust? Let me not go to Channels. Trust TV aired an investigative report, and you say, you pay 5 million for airing that investigative report. It doesn't happen anywhere. It does, because the duty of a journalist is to talk to all parties to a story. And simply because we spoke to a particular party, party to a story, you say, you are going to pay 5 million. Why did you talk to them? You understand? Which is a way of gagging, the press. Somebody comes on TV and says, okay, this is what I feel. You say, what you said is against government, so you must pay a fine. That is not how to do this business. The business, this place is supposed to be like what the chairman of Daily Trust called a town hall. In a town hall meeting, people express their minds. You understand? Now, if you have any issue against what somebody has said, you go to court. Then why do you go to court? Go with your evidence. And we have laws in Nigeria that you can invoke when you go to court. But what the government wants to do is to say, okay, we don't want this to happen. We don't want government to be criticized. We don't want any complaint against government officials.
So what this means that with the existence of this commission, the government will not just unilaterally just clamp down or do anything, because they'll have to interface with these members of this commission, right?
Yes. Of course, if government has any complaint against any agency of any media organization, they should interface with this team that we set up now. But the issue is, to what extent does government recognize what the independent media owners have done? That is another thing. So the next stage is to convince government, like, look, these guys are credible individuals. These guys can take care of some of the things, some of the complaints that you have. For instance, if somebody appears on Trust TV and government is not happy about what the person has said, okay, go to Emeka Ezeze's
this commission is basically for the print and the online media.
So I think it's a good development, and I hope that government will accept, the team and work with the team instead of, clamping down on media houses, instead of using policemen to run after journalists, to chase them up and down, to attack them or whatsoever. I think.
All right then. Let's move to other stories on making headlines. Last week, the media space was agog following the advisory by the Department of State Services, the DSS, of plans by some elements to, impose an interim national government. And this week, we're still seeing, especially on the front page of the Guardian newspaper, Afenifere Ohaneze, Arewa youth reject interim government plot. So it seems the plot thickens despite the DSS advisory. So what's your take on the entire thing?
Well, there is, I think I like the editorial that Daily Trust published on Sunday. It's a joke taking too far. As far as I am concerned, I don't think it's something that we should waste our time on, because the DSS has capacity, to investigate and to arrest anyone who is plotting interim government. Now, my own thinking is that the issue of interim government has been hovering, for quite some time now. In February 2022, I think, Chief Afebola talked about an interim. But the reason why he talked about it was because of the crisis in Nigeria. He said, look, with this crisis, with killings, how can you organize an election? That was one of the things I see. Then during the campaign, you heard people within some political parties who felt that the cashless policy or the Naira redesign was meant to create confusion and install an interim government. Then you now began to hear people talking about, the election was not free and fair, so you cannot swear in president. But for the DSS to come to issue a statement, it seems they know much more than we know. It means they know, that something is being done by those who have the capacity, to stop the swearing in of a government. And that is where my emphasis is. If somebody comes on air to say, look, this election was not free and fair, so let's have an interim government, that doesn't mean that he has the capacity. There are people who have capacity to say there cannot be a swearing in of government.
So why aren't they naming names?
I'm coming.
Why are they naming names? I mean, they said they know these people, so why aren't they naming names?
So if they know those who have the capacity, to do this thing, they have to stop them. You understand? Instead of telling us, people want to do this. If you know those who want to do it, because the act setting up the SSS or the DSS is to forestall anything that has to do with that will affect national security. They say if you know that anything is being planned at the level of plot, you have to stop it. You understand? So you don't wait for it to happen. And that's why you have the SSS. They get information from different sources. They know the dangerous steps that have been taken by some individuals. Then they must stop. And I will encourage them, if the people who are planning this are within the corridors of power, they should be able to stop them. Because, you see, I don't think that even protests can stop the swearing in of the president-elect. Protests cannot stop because people have the right to protest. The important thing is that when you protest, you don't violate another person's right. So if somebody is coming on TV to say, this government must not be sworn in, that doesn't mean that he has the power to stop the government from being sworn in. It is the DSS, who have told us that, look, this is a plot that should stop that plot. It's not the journalist.
Okay, so doctor, the DSS released a statement and they said, look, we are aware that this is happening and we know that some of those people who are planning this, one would expect that they match their words with action and corroborate by, making arrests here and there. But since the statement was made, not much has been heard afterwards. Like you said, it's just protests and different organizations coming out to say we're not in support of it and all of that. So don't you think nerves would be frayed if the DSS would perhaps make some arrests? So even if you're not going to name names, at least give us an update. It's been a week now and not much has been heard. Don't you think arrests would actually help the situation so that those who are actually part of the plot would do well to refrain from it?
Well, I think there is if they take a step, if they arrest one or two persons, will not know, this, but then there must be people who are powerful enough, to stage, to prevent the swearing in of the new government. If you look at interim government in Nigeria, the one of 1993, after the coup, we knew those who did it. We knew that, look, election was stopped and those in power had to install an interim government. You understand? And so interim government is not something that just stopping a government from being put in place is not something that anybody on the street can plot and achieve.
You have to wield some sort of
power. You must have a measure of, you must be in the corridors of power.
All right, but
you must have some capacity to be able to do it. And that is why I've said before, it's the DSS who should do their job.
Okay, but since the election, we have been having pockets of protests here and there. Yesterday, there was a clash in Port Harcourt where even one person was killed, a clash between Rivers APC and PDP. And I'm wondering, I mean, most of these parties have gone to court already. So why are we still having protests here and there? Why are we not waiting for the judicial process to just take its course?
I think the issue in Rivers, for instance, even during the election, there was violence. And if you listen to what each party has been, especially the APC, which lost out in Rivers, the complaining. I think the APC flag bearer is even saying that his life is being threatened. There's a lot of pressure even on INEC, and it has to do with the credibility of the election. A lot of people don't even think that the court of law will do justice. But as we keep saying, it's good to prevent bloodshed. It's good to prevent bloodshed. It's good to make use of the mechanism that is available, that is the court of law, in dealing with any electoral dispute. Because, if you kill one human life, it's a whole lot. This election is not worth the life of any individual.
All right, Dr. Theophilus Abba, Director at the Daily Trust Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us this morning on the newspaper review.
Thank you very much.
Have you subsequently. And that's the much we can take for the newspaper review this morning. We'll return at the top of the hour to serve you more on Daybreak. Don't go anywhere.